Isaremu. He's the Vice President, NLC. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, we've actually seen a whole lot, letter writings here and there, and this one looks to us like a book, 18-page.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There used to be a writer who titled one of his books long later. This should have been so much titled. 18 pages actually a letter, but I think, strictly speaking, it's not a laughing matter. I personally feel quite diminished for once as a Nigerian and as an African that the story coming from Nigeria at the time we're celebrating a global icon who's also an African, Nelson Mandela. Instead of story of despair, of disunity, of bad governance. I mean, the devil is in the details, and if you read this later, I mean, whether you take the reaction of the presidency or the letter itself, certainly this is not a good story about Nigeria. And I don't want to go into the details. As I've said, the devil is in the details, and there are so many. I mean, a strong allegation coming from a former head of state against an incumbent president, coming from his own political party, and he also midwife even this presidency. For me, it's not a very pleasant story for the continent. And I'm saying this with all sense of responsibility because one of the greatest regrets of the late Nelson Mandela was Nigeria. One of his greatest regrets was Nigeria, and we're confirming that.
And he said a lot about us.
He said, I say so. They asked him a question, I think it was 2000 or so. And recently, I think a Nigerian had written about this encounter with him. You must have read it. That's Baba Ahmed, a very good friend of mine. But before then, I had also read an interview you had. They asked, what was your greatest regret? 2 issues he mentioned, and they were about Nigeria. He said his lowest moment was in 1995 when he had to preside over the meeting of Commonwealth, expelling Nigeria from Commonwealth. It was in Zimbabwe. He presided over. And he said he was doing everything to make sure Nigeria wouldn't be expelled. It was during the period of the worst form of dictatorship we ever had on the continent, Abacha dictatorship.
That was the killing of Ken
No,
Saro.
even before the killings. I mean, there are a lot of serious human rights violations, but Commonwealth group had made up the mind to say Nigeria was becoming a pirate state to be expelled. But Mandela was doing the last-minute effort to do so. But on the eve of the meeting, Abacha hanged Ken Saro, and that was the last straw. And he said, wait, how can I preside over a meeting in which Nigeria will be expelled? Because Nigeria liberated us. Without Nigeria, among other African states, I mean, we couldn't have been liberated because Nigeria was one of the frontline states. Even though we are not on the front line in Southern Africa, but our commitment to liberation of South Africa. I mean, you remember the Murtala Obasanjo regime. I mean, Africa had come of age famous speech by Murtala Mohammed. May so rest in peace. You know what we did for South Africa Relief Fund. Workers contributed generally in this country. Nigeria had the longest serving chairman of our tripartite committee, Alhaji Metama Sule. And you look at the resources we pumped there. And he said, now, Nigeria couldn't just get the sums right to the point that he had to come out of prison and preside over the expulsion. Then the second one he also mentioned, if I can recollect vividly, he said he couldn't have survived in prison to hear that anybody killed Winnie Mandela. That's his wife, Winnie. And he referred to the case of the late Kudirat Abiola, that it was bad enough that a man won election. It was worse for you to go and assassinate his wife. I mean, for him, it was beyond any human, understanding. I mean, what was happening to Nigeria, a great country of Zik of Africa, of Obafemi Awolowo, Tafawa Balewa, I mean, the real founding fathers of the continent. I mean, if you know, Nigeria produced it's good that we are celebrating Mandela today, but people like Mandela had the memory to know that without great people of Nigeria in the 50s, in the 60s, including, of course, Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, who said the tone running, it couldn't have been anything. But now it's sad that this kind of stories, I've told you this letter, and some of the things that Obasanjo said there, for me, he only increased the noise level of the issues because there are issues that we've been debating. If it is about oil theft, It's about lack of accountability, shielding corruption. Many people have said so, but that these stories is coming, for better, for worse, whether from former Edo State against an incumbent in Nigeria. For me, story coming from the continent is not the best. And I say so because you must have been following the barrier. I mean, even Mandela, Obama, to have, I don't know, the accidental handshake with Raul Castro of Cuba. I mean, we are talking of even possibly the end of ideology. I mean, people are trying to build bridges, look at the virtues of Nelson Mandela. And then here we are back to the trenches, upstairs. For me, it's nothing to really celebrate over. And I feel quite diminished that this story coming from this continent today. And you can even see, even the celebration of Mandela, we are not on the radar. I'm serious, and it's sad.
That in spite of all our contribution,
precisely,
we're not given a chance to speak.
I was surprised to see the Western leaders, queuing up left and right. They kept Mandela in prison. They were in bed. I mean, Europe and America, Britain in particular, United States, were in bed with apartheid throughout. Doing constructive engagement, Margaret Thatcher, Renda Rogan, but now they've privatized, because we who fought for liberation of Mandela, we can't even liberate ourselves. We're back to colonial, and Obama said so in his speech, that, it's easier to celebrate Mandela's virtue of freedom, but there are people who still kept their people in bondage, and there are more in the continent. And for me, this story is like this. I mean, the story of Obasanjo's story, whatever it is, the merit of it or the merit, as far as I'm concerned, this diminishes all of us. And I think maybe Nigerians have to determine the truth between two of them. That's the way I see it. Because for whatever it is worth, I think what should worry us, including Obasanjo, that the country presided over for almost a decade, democratically, and the party he left for us, including those people he recommended for us, put us into this mess. I mean, there's some sense of responsibility also on his part.
Is it?
I mean, assuming that there's merit in what he has said, but on the whole, I'm just looking at bigger picture.
So we're acknowledging. I mean, you see.
Yeah, no,
you seem to be acknowledging and then withdrawing at the same time.
No, I'm not. It's not about withdrawing. I'm saying the devil is in the details. I mean, this story that is coming, I mean, this is certainly not about good governance.
Definitely not.
Yeah, definitely not. Mm-hmm. Serial theft. I mean, we're in a democracy. We are hearing that the government, sitting government is training snipers against Nigerians for having political opposition, the disagreement. I mean, it's like formally confirming series of reported killings, unresolved killings we've had before. Even including right from his own tenure down to the period that we're in now. For me, it's very scary. And I said, this cannot be a pleasant story. I'm just looking at the bigger picture to say, it's time for Nigerians to change our narrative from this story of despair, of acrimonies, over of people that we should hold accountable, all of them.
Is this a face-saving mode?
We are really. I mean, it's not the best of story coming from Nigeria and for the continent as a whole.
Do you think the letter is to save face?
Of who?
Or to bring the truth, or to show for the truth?
No, wait. What I'm saying here is that's why I'm not really in the mood to look at the content of this letter on the whole. But I've said that we're having this kind of revelation at this hour, in which, I mean, the story in Ghana. They're talking of concluded elections. You also talk of a relatively level of unity between successful leaders, and in Nigeria we can't really get it right to the point that those, as you say in Yoruba, they enter for Otitoni Tumbaje. Those that we are supposed to help us, they are also the one agonizing. For me, that cannot be the best of story. But let me put it this way, to say that this is not the first time President Obasanjo will intervene, for his successors. People can debate the beauty of it. There are people who will say, well, it's legitimate, it's right. There are some people also say, well, as a statesman, He could have a better way to handle it. In fact, one of the things that people celebrate Mandela for was ability, after he has left, he moved on without necessarily looking back. I mean, he had cause possibly to engage his successor, but not so openly. You know, I mean, he had a way to channel his views. But the point I'm raising is that the content of this letter, a good number of issues that are here, many Nigerians have talked about them. You know,
sometimes
many, oil theft, the issue of corruption, seeing corrupt people who are alarmed that people who are supposed to be tried for murder, I mean, you know very well, who have been released, who goes up and down, giving the cover, moving up and down. I mean, there's a lot of distortion of views. People have said so. So they're possibly nothing new. But on the whole, I want to say that it's time for us to have something new for Nigeria. And we can't just be on this vicious circle, as the case may be. You know, I also had some of the issues that, that's why I said devil's in the details. Some of them we have known in public domain, people have talked about them. But we also refer to some election in some states